Hi there, business owner. Do you want a better understanding of business finance, what your numbers actually mean, and stories of the highs and lows of business, where I'll be sharing my tips and tricks every week? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 3Bs podcast. As always, I'm your host Stephanie. If this is the first episode you're listening to, welcome to the podcast. If you are a listener that's been listening for a while, thank you for being here again. I love coming on here every week and recording these podcasts and getting to help you build a better business. This week, I wanted to talk to you about branding. Now, branding is a very wide term, and we're going to talk about personal branding, business branding, who should have which, who should have one, maybe the other or both, and why they're really important, but also why they're not important. And that will become clear later in the episode. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'd love to hear what you think. So let's just get into it. So branding is the way that your business is recognised. Is probably the easiest way to explain it. There's personal branding, there's business branding, and there's both. Like, you can have one, you can have the other, you can have both. And depending on the type of business owner you are, depending on the type of business you are, that's going to be different across the different businesses. If you own different businesses, each corporate branding may be slightly different too. So there's no one size fits all approach here. Obviously, some are better for others, in my opinion. But branding is basically so much more than your logo, font and colours that you use on all your marketing. Like, your branding is how you are perceived to your ideal client and to your audience and to the world. So it's very important that your branding portrays the message that you are aiming for within the business. I think it's really important to look at your company values and your company goals and ensure that they are reflective in your business's branding. I'm going to start with corporate branding because I feel like that's the one that will be most relevant to you all, because most people will have a corporate brand. If you have a business, you'll have a corporate branding or a business branding. And that needs to embody the business's values. It needs to embody the message that you are trying to get across to your client. One thing that I think is really important with branding is to not overthink it. It can be incredibly simple. There is many free tools out there now that you can use to help you with bits that you're having issues with. ABCS UK has been through two different brandings. I started very blue, very corporate, very traditional bookkeeping accountancy branding. That was kind of where I felt I needed to be taken seriously as a bookkeeping accountancy practice, as a business that is in the financial services. Obviously, it's heavily regulated as well, and it adds that level of corporate, I believe. And then around 18 months after starting ABCS UK, I was going through a big change in the business anyway. I was going through a pivot. I'd gone past the point of taking any work that sort of came my way to actually looking at who I could help the most, who I really wanted to serve, who I really wanted to work with, and realised actually female business owners in the UK of limited companies, mums in business are obviously ideal clients of mine because I relate to them so easily, but business owners in the UK, ideally limited companies, who are already at that or close to that six-figure turnover, that 85,000 a year turnover mark or above for the VAT, that's where my sweet spot was. That was where I was finding I was giving the most value to my clients. That's where I felt that they were getting from me what they needed. They were seeing the great results. We were having, great conversations. It was truly making a difference to their business, and the analytics were tangible and you could physically see the difference that it was making us working together. And that was the light bulb for me. And I realised that my blue corporate, very business-like branding was not talking to my ideal client. My ideal client is just like me. And I think for a lot of business owners, particularly in the service sector, that is the same for a lot of them. Their ideal client is either themselves or a version of themselves in the past. And I think that's what made me change the branding. So we went for a complete rebrand, and we kept the name, we kept the office building, and we kept the bulk of the logo. There were slight tweaks to the logo to make it much more clear about what we are and what we do. And I completely changed the colour palette. And I used a free tool called Coolers. I will put the link in the show notes. And I knew I wanted a bright pink. I have a bright pink coat, a Ted Baker coat. You'll see it all over social media. It comes out every winter, and I hate having to put it away in the summer. Big fuchsia pink coat. It's my favourite coat. I love wearing it. It makes me more visible. It makes me stand out, which again, your branding needs to do that. So I knew I wanted that pink somewhere in the branding. I didn't want to lose the blue. I did a lot of research into colour psychology, which I'll go into more in the next episode of the podcast. But I knew I wanted the blue for what it meant, and I knew I wanted the pink because it represented me, and I think it represented, women and mums in business. It felt very nurturing and it felt like it fit. So I used the Coolers to create a builder palette, and I ended up going for kind of ice creamy colours. So we have the pink and the blue, which kind of fades into the purple when you put it on a gradient. And then we have a couple of yellows to, one yellow is my favourite colour, and two, yellow sunshine. And it all looks almost ice cream colourish. And when I think back to the branding I chose when I started ABCS UK, it's an entire world away from what we are now. And I think that's the most important thing I want you to take from this episode, is that your branding can change. Now, I don't recommend that every couple of months you come up with a new logo and a new colouring, because the audience will struggle to keep up with you. But it is okay to change, and I say it in business all the time, because it is okay to change, and it's something that myself and all of my clients find as a little bit of a hurdle. It's a stumbling block for all of us. We don't feel we can change if we've already gone in one direction, and as business owners you can absolutely change at any point, and I think that's really important to remember. So you have your business and you have your corporate branding. Now you may also need a personal brand. Now this is really important if you are a service-based business. So if you are a coach or somebody who deals one-on-one with the consumer or the customer. If you're working B2C, so business to consumer, again, I feel like a personal brand is sometimes more important, because people will come to work with your company because they want to work with you, not necessarily to work with the company. So your personal brand is really important if you are one of those types of people. They're not essential, but I feel that my personal brand adds slightly more to ABCS UK as a whole, rather than me not having that extra personal brand. Now, my personal brand, the podcast, is a slightly different branding, and your personal brand is not necessarily your colours, your fonts and your logos. It's more about the messaging, the way you speak, what different types of social media you use. For example, if your sweet spot is LinkedIn and your ideal clients are there, then absolutely. I feel LinkedIn is much more a personal brand place anyway, because you have your personal profile and people tend to have conversations and build their network on a personal level rather than with the business on a business page. So your personal brand adds another layer of visibility, and it's people that want to work with you. So my personal brand and my personal values, although they're similar to my business values, they're not the same thing. My personal values are sometimes a little bit more strict. The business values are very much the honesty, the excellence, the communication, and that's absolutely key across both. But the high levels of customer service, for example, is not really relevant in my personal brand. Like me as a human, yes, I am kind. I'm not always treat people with kindness, but that's not necessarily the same thing. But I do think if you are on that type of, in that type of business, if you are a solo director or a sole trader, you know, if it is just you, the business is an entity of you, you don't have staff as well. I think a personal brand is great because people want to build that network with you. Somebody who does it really well is Zoe Whitman and Joe Wood. So they own the Six Figure Bookkeeper that I'm a part of. and they have their personal brands. Zoe is a fantastic coach. Jo is fantastic at what she does as well. She's recently changed direction. Again, it can happen at any time. But they are two incredible humans, and they're very open and they're very honest on their social medias independently, as mums in business, as female entrepreneurs. And their personal brands are what brought me into the Six Figure Bookkeeper in the first place. Like, I hadn't looked at that, and it was their personal brands that drew me in, because I saw myself in them. The things they were talking about, I could relate to, and that sometimes gives people that extra push to get into your world, to see what your business is about, and actually realise that you can really help them, or you can help fulfill the desire or solve the problem that they have. So I do think it's important to have both in some aspects. However, if your business is a large corporation, if you have multiple employees and a few directors or managers maybe in the business, a personal brand is not as important. I think the other thing I probably would say before I forget is, if you have more than one business, a personal brand I feel is very important, because that's what links all the businesses together. And very often, if you own multiple businesses, they usually follow on from each other in one way or another. So, for example, Zoe Whitman has her coaching business. She's a fantastic coach and helps women in business get unstuck and get clear and actually make some changes in the business and make improvements and progress. But she also has the Six Figure Bookkeeper, which is specifically there to help bookkeepers build better practices. And she does both, but we know Zoe as Zoe Whitman. So whether you're on the coaching side, whether you're on the bookkeeping side, or whether you're on both, it's Zoe that holds the glue together. And I know quite a few people have gone from being in the Six Figure Bookkeeper to then going to buy from her services as a coach, because they already know, like, and trust her from the Six Figure Bookkeeper, but it's her personal brand that links the two together. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. Like I say, you may need one, you may need both, you may not need either. And it's important to do what you want to do, not necessarily what society expects of you. I have built my business on doing things differently to everyone else in the industry, and I'm having success because I feel like I do it differently, and I am more innovative, and I like to take things I've learned from other areas of business rather than sticking to the accountancy niche and applying it to my business itself. So remember, you can change at any point. Like I say, I don't recommend you doing it every couple of weeks, but absolutely, if you feel like your branding is no longer working for you or your business is going into a different direction, absolutely consider changing it if you feel that it's the right fit. Remember that at the end of the day, your branding is helping improve visibility, and it's helping people to remember you, know, like, and trust you, which means they will then purchase from you or be much more likely to do so. And don't be afraid to ask for help, to outsource if necessary. If you want to do it yourself, especially if you're in the early stages of business, Canva has fantastic templates that you could use and then tweak. And I will put in the show notes the link to the colour palette generator that I used for our rebrand at ABCS UK. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. I am looking forward to talking to you all next week about colour psychology. It's something that I've been looking into for quite a while, so I'm excited to share with you all I've learned and applied in my business and in my clients' businesses. As always, if you are listening and you've enjoyed this podcast, please do like, subscribe, rate and review. It's really important for increasing the amount of listeners I can reach. The more business owners I can help, the better. It's something I am so passionate about. If you have any questions at any point, you can always contact us on social media, ABCS UK, or find me on LinkedIn, or send me an email. The email address is on our website, www.abcsuk.com, and I'll see you all next week. And that brings us to the end of another week of the 3Bs podcast with Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening. I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, rate and review this podcast wherever you are listening to it, so that I can reach more business owners and help them build better businesses. See you next week for the next episode.